With the rise of multiplayer PvP games in the last 5 or so years, we've seen a decline in cooperative story-driven games being created by larger studios, with one exception, Hazel Light Studios. A studio focused completely on co-op games, they've released 3 games since 2013. Brothers, A Way Out, and of course, It Takes Two, with each game improving in certain aspects on the previous release. Very recently, It Takes Two won Best Multiplayer Game, Best Family Game, and Game of the Year at the Game Awards. This further cements my belief that It Takes Two is the gold standard for cooperative video games because of its accessibility to players of all skill levels and its ever changing mechanics. Firstly, we'll look at the developer's approach to player accessibility and an audience centered design. It Takes Two is created to be accessible to a large range of players. This is no easy feat for a cooperative video game with a set difficulty. Skilled players and beginners must be taken into account as well as their strengths and weaknesses in areas such as platforming and puzzle solving. These aspects of the game must then result in a positive user experience that's accompanied by a learning curve where anyone can understand the game's core mechanics and becoming skilled over time is achievable. It Takes Two was able to achieve all of this. To get a better understanding of how exactly they achieved such a difficult challenge, we need to first understand the audience by looking through the lens of the player. The game was marketed towards all ages who enjoy a story based cooperative experience with fantasy and comedic elements. Players also knew that gameplay would consist primarily of platforming and puzzle solving. This tells us that when designing the game, these core aspects must be the main focal point for the duration of the game, because that is what their audience expects to see. It also tells us what players will most likely not want to see in the game, such as survival horror or real time strategy elements. This knowledge can then be applied to the designer player relationship template. So that the player has fun, the designer must incorporate those expected core game elements into the various activities that the player will interact with and the rules that are created to support them. To see this in action, let's look at the shed section of the game. The rules or mechanics that we see here is the hammer ability that allows May to use her hammer to interact with specific objects by smashing it, and Cody's nail, which can be thrown onto specific surfaces and coupled with May's hammer to allow her to travel large distances in the air. When used to create the game's activities, these rules create platforming and puzzle moments, which result in an overall fun experience for the player. It Takes Two has elevated the standard of cooperative video games with its unique take on game mechanics. Their vast variety of constantly changing mechanics encourage player communication and promote a more engaging experience. The new mechanics that are given to May and Cody at the beginning of each section can be used in a variety of ways and force players to work together. You might be thinking that introducing this many mechanics would deter from Hazelight Studios' approach to making the game accessible to everyone, because it would become confusing for the player, but you would be mistaken. The mechanics are implemented in various stages of difficulty. At the start of each level, the players will be given a simple puzzle that is easily achievable. As the level plays out, you have to use the mechanics in progressively difficult ways. Finally, at the end of a section, you'll be faced with a boss that will force players to utilize what they've learned throughout the level to defeat it and progress to the next section. After which, the cycle continues, new mechanics progressively introducing ways to utilize them, and ending with a boss that combines all of your past knowledge and experience. This cycle keeps players engaged and entertained. We can garner a better understanding of the game's mechanics by looking at them through the MDA framework. This theory will allow us to recognize how the mechanics interact with the game's dynamics to create the aesthetics. The level, the tree, involves aesthetics such as challenge and sensation. The first aesthetic, challenge, is evoked through dynamics such as puzzle solving and platforming. These dynamics are created by simple mechanics such as jumping and running, as well as more complicated mechanics such as May's rocket launcher and Cody's sap gun. The second aesthetic, sensation, which in this case is the sensation of fear, emerges through dynamic behaviors such as danger and the possibility of failure. The mechanics that help to form these dynamics are the swarm of wasps and the other various enemies that we see throughout the level. By doing this analytical breakdown of It Takes Two, I was able to truly understand that the game was developed with the user's experience at the forefront of everything. By making the game accessible to different skill levels and encouraging player cooperation through mechanics, a fantastic cooperative experience was created. Future co op games will require varied and accessible gameplay to try and compete with the likes of It Takes Two. Thank you for listening.